The determination of the storage location, either in the sales order or the delivery, is quite important to the order to cash and to the supply chain process in general. This is because the storage location determines where we should reduce the stock when we do the PGI. And if the field is empty when we do the PGI, an error will be created. Also, the storage location is part of the determination for the WM warehouse. So you could have different storage locations that could potentially select different WM warehouses, or even not select the WM warehouse at all. And it all starts from the sales order. So in the delivery, when you create a delivery, it will look first to see if the storage location is populated in the sales order. And it can either be populated manually in the sales order, or you could determine it via user exit. In the sales order, there is no automatic or configurable way to determine the storage location. So either you have to populate it in manually or via user exit in the sales order, and that will copy automatically into the delivery. If the sales order is blank, we'll see in a minute, the rule MALA, and that is a configuration rule that we assign. So that we say is when you create the sales order, go through the rule MALA to determine where the storage location is. And we'll have a look at detail how this is done. Also, you can populate the storage location via user exit in the delivery. A user could manually populate it, or you could even populate it from an external system. So for example, if the picking was done by an external system, and when it confirmed the picking, it could also send the storage location. But in the end, look at the business process. Understand how the business process works, when you would actually determine the picking location, and that should be the point in which you populate or decide the storage location in SAP. So look at the process. When in the process you determine the storage location, that also is in SAP when you should determine storage location and populate the document. So if we look in this sales order and we double click through and have a look at the shipping tab, notice how the storage location is blank. As I said before, it's only determined in the delivery. So if we now deliver this, so here I'm going to create the delivery. If I go into the picking tab, you can now see that the storage location has been automatically populated and the warehouse is there also. So when I create the delivery, storage location is automatically determined. So let's go ahead and save this. And if I were to go back into the delivery, oops, it's still being created. Let's try that again. Okay, so if I go back into the delivery and I change it to a different storage location and I press enter, notice now that all the WM information is missing. That's because this storage location is not relevant for WM. So that I just wanted to show you this so you see really the importance of the storage location determination. It drives the WM determination, so it's important to get it right when we create the delivery. So now let's have a look at the 3 configuration items that we would need to do to determine the storage location. The first is we need to define or determine or assign the rules, i.e. which fields do we use to determine the storage location. We then have to determine the storage condition or define the storage condition, and finally we would have to assign those the picking location. So let's have a look in SPRO, standard configuration, go to IMG, go into logistics execution, and then shipping. Oops, this is a bit longer than I expect. Oh, here we go. Picking. And if we look at determine picking location, define the rules for picking location determination. So as you can see here, each delivery type is assigned a rule, and by default, mostly it's mala. So what does mala actually mean? So what does actually mala or any other rule means? Basically, what it's saying is that how do I determine the storage location? What are the fields that are used to determine the storage location? So if you see here mala, we determine it by taking into account the shipping point, the plant, and the storage location. So here you can see Rita, which uses the plant, situation, and storage condition. Then you have say use mala and Rita, so that means both, or you can even use YY, which is a user exit. Totally how you want to determine the storage location. Most people use mala because it's pretty simple. If we now look at the storage condition value in this configuration, we can define the different storage conditions that we want. Now, if we now go to the material master, and if we go, let's go to the material master, and for this material, if we now go to the general plant data storage 1 view for the plant, on the plant level, here is where the system would determine the storage condition. I can either leave it blank or populate it, and it's on the plant view, not the, yeah? So if we go back, and now we say assign picking location, and if we were to look here, let's go to our shipping point 2400 and plant 2400. We can see here how we determine the storage location based on the storage condition, whether it's blank or 01. So this is the configuration on how we would determine the storage location, taking into account the shipping point, the plant, the storage condition, whether it's 01 or blank. Now, this is great. You now know how the system determines it. But how do we actually use it? That's a different question. In most companies, in most places, we would have different storage location based on different types of material. Because remember, the storage condition is on the material. That actually means we can determine the storage location also based on material. And what we would actually do is to say, for example, all raw materials are placed in one storage location, and all finished goods are placed in a different storage location. And what we then say is, for these raw materials, it has a particular storage condition that would point to a particular storage location, and for finished goods, it's assigned a different storage condition that will then point to a different storage location. I'm being a little bit careful here because I always mix up storage condition and shipping location. Also, if you're only shipping out finished goods, for example, you could divide the plant where certain finished goods are in one storage location and another type or group of storage or material is in a different storage location, and you can then give them different storage condition. So in the end, what you need to take away is one of the biggest drivers of the storage location determination is the storage condition of that material on the material master. And that is the rule that we use generically for mala. Other businesses, if your determination is not based on this, the best practice is to actually use the user exit to determine your logic. So to recap, the most commonly used way to determine a storage location is by the logic mala. And if you do use the logic mala, It's really driven by the shipping point, the plant, and the storage condition. And as we said before, the storage condition is assigned on a material. So in theory, we could say the determination of the storage location is driven by shipping point, plant, and material. If you choose to use Mala, which most companies do. Okay, so that is how we determine the storage location in the delivery. So finally, to recap, the determination of storage location is either done in the sales order, manually, or via user exit. It's determined when you create the delivery via the configuration, and by, in most cases, the Mala rule, as you can see here. If you choose to turn it off, then the storage location will be blank, and you would either have to manually populate it, or have a user, or if it's from an interface, maybe populate it via an interface. And that is how storage locations is determined in SAP. In this lecture, we are going to have a look at the concept of picking. Now, picking in SAP is quite simple, but in this video, we are going to have a look at the picking process itself, some of the concepts surrounding the picking process, and how SAP does the picking. In short, or in the simplest way, picking can be defined as the activity in which a small number of goods are taken from the warehouse and placed in another location, usually called a picking or packing station. And it is a physical movement of material. In a more complex term of picking, or in SAP, it's the activity of collecting materials from its current storage location and place them in a pre-designed area, as we said before, usually known as a packing area. In the simplest form, in SAP, a picking activity is updating the picking field in this SAP delivery document. So the field picking, you just update the quantity. In the more complex form, the picking can be done by creating a transfer order. We can create an individual transfer order per material, or we can consolidate all of the picking into one transfer order. Before we continue on talking about the various different types of picking and so forth, when a consultant approaches the picking process, it's important to differentiate between what physically happens and what you want to model in SAP. What I mean by this is it could be that the picking process physically is quite complex. You go to different bins, you pick lots of things, you have the users do quite a lot of complex things, but it could be that in SAP you just want a simple picking because all of the complexity is done somewhere else. A good example of this is that if you have your own warehouse system that is outside of SAP, you can then say, okay, in SAP we do a very simple picking process. You just say update the picking quantity, and then you let the external system handle all the complexities. So SAP simple, external system more difficult. Or it could be that you want SAP to model all of your picking processes to handle your whole warehouse. In that case, the picking process will be more complex, and most probably you would use some degree of warehouse management, for example. There are actually lots of different ways in order to do the picking. The first type of picking is actually something called the pick to part, in which a picker will be given a list of all the materials that they need to pick, usually for one delivery, and they would go through all of the bins, picking all the materials for that one delivery. A refinement of that is to zone picking, in which one picker is given part of the delivery, and they will only pick all the materials that are in their zone. So one picker would pick for that particular delivery for zone A, and then another picker would pick for the same delivery materials that only are stored in zone 2. And they would all bring it to one location, a packing station, and that delivery again will be consolidated. You then have wave picking, in which the picker is given orders from lots and lots of deliveries but are consolidated. So for example, a picker would go to bin A and pick, let's say, 3 of material A, and that is maybe for 2 deliveries. Yeah. So rather than pick for 1 delivery at a time, he actually picks 3 or 4 deliveries per bin. Next is something called a sorting system, where the picker stands still and the products are brought to him to pick. And lastly, we have something called the box picking, which is usually a box is a picker stands in front of a shelf. A box is brought in front of them, usually by a conveyor belt, and on that they have what they need to pick from their own shelf. So they stand there, they pick everything that's against their own shelf. Yeah, they say, okay, I've completed it, and then the box is then sent to another picker, who then says, oh, okay, in front of my zone for this box, I need to pick something else. Yeah, so this is so each picker is actually in charge of a particular zone. It's like zone picking, except the picker doesn't have to move. The box actually moves with the picker. And once it's finished, the box will be full for your order, and then it's ready for packing. Before we go into SAP, which is actually the easy part, let's have a look at some of the concepts that you will see in the warehouse or so forth for picking. The first is something called picking strategy. So let me put that in, strategy, which in short is the path in which you do your picking, i.e. how do you go from one bin to another in the most efficient way to do your picking. So for example, you could have a picking method where you move from bin A, and after you finish picking from bin A, you would go to bin B, and then you would then go to, let's say, bin C, so you have to go backwards again, and then you go to bin D, which is alphabetically pretty simple. Yeah, but as you can see, it may not be the most efficient way to do your picking. You could do picking from bin A to bin C, and then from bin C you go to bin D, and then you go to bin B, and then it might be that you finish. So the path itself, yeah, is called a picking strategy, and it's outlined in the picking document. So your picking document will tell you go to bin A first, then bin C, and so forth. Yeah, and it's usually driven by the layout of your warehouse and how you've put your bins together. The second concept that we want to have a look is something called consolidation or consolidated picking. So let's put it there, consolidation. And consolidation means that rather than go away, visit each bin for each delivery, what I'm going to do is I'm going to consolidate my picking. I am going to have, I'm going to group multiple deliveries together and visit one bin and pick for all of those deliveries at the same time. And it usually means it's a single pick for different deliveries. Yeah, so in our example here, I have delivery 1, 2, 3, and I had delivery 4, 5, 6. That's actually been split over 2 picking. I've split them because they're in different zones, for example. So pick list 1, I'll visit bin A only once and bin B1 only once. And it's the same here, as you can see, for pick list 2, I only visit bin C1 only once, and I would pick it for both for the pick list. Yeah. The advantage of this is it actually means that my travel around the warehouse is minimized. Yeah. So for, as I said before, let's assume for this pick list here, when I visit bin A1, I will pick for delivery number 1, and I will pick for delivery number 2. And it's the same for bin number 2. If I visit bin number 2, I will pick for delivery number 1 and delivery number 2 if I had it. Yeah, it's just a simple kind of concept of how this works. The third concept is something called pick cycle, which is in some sense a unit of how much you can pick within a certain amount of time. And it's usually to divide the picking into a sizable amount that a picker can do within one particular cycle. Yeah, so usually, so what can be picked in one unit of time that's been defined or one go. Yeah, so for example, let's say a picker is given 15 minutes to pick either 10 materials or visit 10 bins. Now, it's a simple concept. So 15 minutes, a picker will have to pick either 10 materials or 10 items or visit 10 bins, one of the two. So he stands there, he's given a transfer order for 10 items, and he has 15 minutes to go and pick them all. Yeah, and that is considered one picking cycle, and once he's picked all of it, he has to put it in the packing area. Once he has picked everything, he's confirmed everything, he's finished his 15 minutes, another transfer order is generated that's asking him to pick another 10 materials, and so forth. Yeah, so this means that there's a couple of advantages for this. One is you know the productivity of a picker. So in 1 hour, you know that a picker can actually pick 40 materials. So it's easy to have a good chunk of how that works. Second, it also sets the expectation of what's going to happen. It produces a nice going flow. Yeah? If a picker sometimes had a very long list and sometimes had a very short list, the flow and the rhythm of the warehouse is slightly interrupted. So to recap, we've had a look at a number of picking concepts. We've had a look at a number of ways picking is done in the warehouse. But we haven't seen how it's done in SAP, which we will cover in our next video. But for now, understand how the picking is physically done, the strategies and concepts surrounding picking, so that when you have that discussion with the WM consultant, you're not totally lost. The feedback that I get from most new consultants is that they have trouble understanding the difference between the inventory management and the warehouse management, and how those two interact between each other, why you must do the picking in one and then you have to do the picking in another, and so forth. So this video is all about the interaction between IM and WM and how the picking goes through each module. So the inventory management is usually coupled with the material management module and is managed by the MM consultant. The warehouse management, or WM, is managed by a WM consultant. So actually two different people. On the inventory management level, we have the stock on plant and storage location level. So we track it on the plant and storage location. If we do a change in the material, we have account postings, or what we can say is there are general ledger implications to what we do. So if we could, for example, reduce the stock, which means that the general ledger has been posted to. we have different stock levels, i.e. we can physically or in the system increase or decrease the level of stock. In the warehouse, in the WM, we have the stock on the bin level. And whatever we do in WM, there's actually no account postings or no account implications of what we do. We're just moving stock around and around. Now imagine, for example, the IM and WM are actually two sides of the same coin. They're two different modules, but they have an interface which interacts between each other. And the core concept that you have to understand is the stock level in inventory management must always equal to the total stock level in the bin. So IM and WM must always be the same. Yeah. In inventory management, we have the stock. We store it on plant and storage location level. So we have one material maybe in a bin, in a stock location and bin level. And this is slightly different on the warehouse management. In the warehouse, we can have multiple bins for one material, and that is a big driver where you want warehouse management. And you can also transfer the material from bin to bin using a transfer order. Yeah. So the biggest driver for people when they want to decide whether they want to use inventory management or warehouse management, one of the biggest drivers is whether or not they want to have one material in more than one bin. Because of the way the master data is set up, one storage location on the material master view, on a plant and storage location view, you can only have one bin. So one material can only be assigned one bin in inventory management, and the bin is actually just a text field. In the warehouse management view, a bin is like a physical location, and you can have multiple materials in one bin, and you can have one material in different bins. Yeah, so that is the main driver. So the important thing to remember is inventory management. We can actually make material movements. So we can change the status, we can change the quantities, and we do this by a material movement. In WM, we can only move the material using a transfer order. And the only thing we can actually do is move a material from one bin to another. We cannot actually increase the stock or reduce the stock. So if we were to just change the status, what we would do is create a transfer order that will just change the status of a material. That's how we do it. So how does this all work? So let's say, for example, in IM, you've created some material, so you've increased your stock. You've done a 101 movement. The system, via the interface, will also magically increase in a very special bin, in bin 101, the same quantity. And what we have to do is, via transfer order, move that material to the correct bin in which we want to store it. Yeah. So now let's say we have a delivery. And in that delivery we want to do our picking, which actually means go to that bin. So we want to do our picking, which actually means go to that bin, take it and put it to the staging area just before it needs to be shipped. The staging area is actually also a special bin in WM. Yeah, and it's, I think, 961, and it's a staging area bin. When you do the PGI, the system will then reduce the stock from that staging area and make it 0. It actually creates a special bin for the negative quantity, and you move it across. So you're reducing the stock in IM, and you move the quantity from that bin to a special, what we call a negative bin, that will also reduce the stock. And this means that the total quantity, both in IM and WM, are balanced. It's great that I've told you all the theory. Now let's look at how it's done in SAP. So first off, let's have a look at a particular material. So, and I'm going to increase the material via MB1C. So before I start, let's have a look at the overall stock value. So I'm going to open a new transaction. So I'm going to use MMBE. So /N MMBE. And for this material, 2882. For this plant, 1000. Storage location 0100. You can see here, quantity of 0. I have no stock at all in the warehouse or in the factory. So I've now increased. I put a quantity of 100. Oops, let's go back. Let's have a look again. Yeah, and let's have a look in logistics execution, internal warehouse processing, bins and stock, display, and let's have a look at, display here, and let's have a look at the bin stock. So for this warehouse, 2882, again, in WM view, we also have a quantity of 0. So there's no stock there in both IM and WM. So I'm now going to make this posting here. Okay, immediately you can see the material document has been created. Now I'm going to refresh, and you can see here I have unrestricted quantity of 100. And logic says, that in WM, must also have a quantity of 100 because they must balance. So let's look in WM. So if I were to go back, put back the material in here. Let's put the material in here. And you can see here I have type 902, so it's a very specific bin, right? And a very intermediate storage bin, WE, which is the warehouse view. You can see here I have 100. And let's be clear here what this means. This means that SAP has placed 100 in a temporary storage location 902 in a temporary bin, a quantity of 100, and it's up to us now to move it to a particular storage location. So I'm creating a transfer order for this. Let's see if I can save it. It's looking for a storage unit type, so I put 1 in. Search for it again, and as you can see, the transfer order has been created. Don't worry so much about how it creates a transfer order. Just understand that a transfer order has been created, and what we are saying is that we are going to move the stock from that current bin, the temporary 902 bin, into the proper bin in SAP. So now let's go and confirm the transfer order. So let's go back into the main SAP menu, and if I go to logistics execution, internal warehouse processing, bins and stock. Stock transfer. There should be a confirmed transfer order, single document, 1 step. So LT12 is a transaction, and transfer order number 3. And as you can see here, I'm moving the stock from 902 into our destination bin. So WE zone here into the proper bin. So I'm moving 100. So the quantity hasn't increased, and all I'm doing is I'm moving it from one bin to another. So understand that concept again. Maybe I'm repeating again, but this is quite an important concept. In IM, the stock hasn't increased, and actually in WM, the stock hasn't increased. All we're doing is moving it from the temporary zone into the proper zone, into the proper bin where the material should exist. So now let's confirm this transfer order. I've saved it, and now if we look at the bin, if we go back, run the transaction again, and now you can see 100 has been correctly moved into the proper bin. And if I refresh IM, you can see on the IM level, nothing has changed. Still 100 of the material. So now let's have a look what happens if I decrease the stock. So let's go back. I am going to now do a material movement, MB1A, and I'm going to do a decrease of 50. So material movement 201. Let me press enter here. I'm just going to put the cost center, the material, and as we said before, quantity of 50. So let me save that. And the document has been posted. That means on inventory management level, if I refresh, we only see 50. But as we said before, right, now let's go to the WM view. Let me put the material in again. We should also see 50 because what we said is IM and WM is always balanced, so there must be 50. And as you can see here again, there's a special type 911 here, special storage bin, and now it's negative 50. So the total of 100 plus minus 50 equals 50. Yeah, so the total in WM is 50, but the system has told you that the minus 50 is in this special bin. And what we have to do is move from 150 into this minus 50 bin. So it may sound confusing, but let's create a transfer order for this. You can see I'm asking the system to find. So it says I found 50 in this bin. Okay, create a transfer order for it, and let's confirm it. So very quickly, let's confirm the transfer order. Yep. So moving from this bin into our negative bin here, 150. If I go and save it. Now let's go back again into the IM view. You can still see it's 50. Yeah, but if I now execute this, you can see I've moved 50 from the bin into the negative bin, so they cancel out and it vanishes from our report, and we can see the balance of 50 in the proper bin here. So that's how the system keeps the two IM and WM balance. If you ever create something in IM, it immediately increases the stock in WM, and if you ever reduce the stock in IM, it then in a very special bin creates a quantity of negative, and we move some material from the normal bin into this negative bin, and that's how we get this overall balancing effect. Now, as a supply chain logistics consultant, you don't need to know how all of this works in detail. As long as you understand the concepts, then you can work with the WM consultants usually, who will manage the warehouse, but you actually know how it works. So you know how the picking works, and you know what the process is. While you're not an expert at it, right, you still have some degree of knowledge and information.